There are so many villagers in Animal Crossing, and I thought it'd be fun to turn some of them into Pokémon Gym Leaders. I'm gonna do one for each of the 18 types, and also give each of them a Pokémon team, obviously. And starting with the water type, going for an octopus or a frog villager seems a little obvious, so I decided to go with Audie instead. I think because of her Happy Home Paradise request, the storyline I would give her is that she's a full-time DJ who's really big in the music industry, kind of like Elisa or Rhyme, who also specializes in water-type Pokemon, so she just became a gym leader on the side, because she's a boss babe. And since her starter house in New Horizons is very beachy and islandy, her gym could also be very beachy and islandy, and maybe even be on an actual beach, or in Alola, although they don't have gyms in Alola. Her team as well would consist of Swanna, Mantine, Sharpedo, Starmie, Primarina, and I think Milotic would be her ace Pokemon. Those two would be a powerful duo. And for some honorable mentions, I have O'Hare, Octavian, Bud, and Lily. I think the four of them could make good gym leaders as well. Next up, I have the fire type, and for that one, I chose Angus, because Angus is literally a Guy Fieri dude. His story would basically be if Guy Fieri was a Pokemon gym leader. He's this world-renowned chef who specializes in barbecue cuisine and owns multiple restaurants around the world, very similar to Kofu from Paldea. And I think Angus is the perfect option because he literally wears a fire tee, and his name is a pun on Angus beef, which is something that's cooked using fire. His team would consist of Simisear, Colossal, because coal is used in barbecues, Scovillian, Torkoal, Arcanine, and Camerupt as his ace, because I think the two of them look alike. That's it. And for some honorable mentions, I have Flip, Tiansheng, Frida, and Goose. I think Camafrog would make a really good grass type gym leader, not necessarily for any like specific lore reasons, but mainly because he just looks like grass. He's one with the jungle as seen by his New Horizons house, so his gym would also 100% go into that jungle foresty theme. And since he's literally a frog that can camouflage, I feel like his gym challenge would just be hide and seek. He hides somewhere in the gym, you have to go around looking for him, and if you look in the wrong spot, bam, you battle one of his minions instead. His team, in my opinion, would have Victreebel, Breloom, Shiftry, Toedscruel, Sawsbuck, specifically the summer form, and Venusaur as his ace, since Venusaur is also a grass frog, just like Camafrog. And yes, that team is very foresty. I feel like those are all Pokemon you can find in the forest, alongside Camafrog. I think other villagers that would make great grass type gym leaders are Deirdre, Toby, Tangy, as well as Jacques, because he reminds me of grass as well, just a different kind. There is literally a personality type in Animal Crossing called Normal. So in theory, any of the normal type villagers could be normal type gym leaders. I decided to spice things up, and instead of picking one, I'm picking two of them, specifically Chevray and Nan. They could be a gym leader duo, kind of like Tate and Liza. It could be fun. Chevray and Nan are based on the Japanese nursery rhyme where two goats are pen pals, and I feel like in my Pokemon universe, the two of them would finally meet up with one another and decide to open a bookstore together and also run the normal type gym. And it is 100% going to be double battles, because double battle gym battles, that's a fun saying. Double battles are really fun, and this is my excuse to have that in my universe. I think their gym team would be Tandemaus, Smeargle, Noctowl, because it reminds me of Duolingo, Purugly, Stoutland. I feel like they would have Dubwool as their ace Pokemon. Makes sense to me, at least. And then for some honorable mentions, I have Tia as well as Sydney, and I chose Sydney mainly because her Happy Home Paradise request is to have an office, so she's basically Larry coded. There is only one option, in my opinion, for the electric type gym, and that is Petrie, our STEM major baddie. She kind of reminds me of Sophocles from Alola, so I feel like she would have a similar storyline. She's an inventor, constantly making new machines. She might have even designed the 3 robot villagers in Animal Crossing, Sprocket, Ribbot, and Cephalobot, who maybe also serve as her minions that you have to battle before you get to her battle. And I don't know, at the same time, she kind of reminds me of Giovanni in the sense that she might be evil and she could have an evil team alongside a gym. I don't know, that'd be fun for me. And for her team, I went with Pikachu, Vikavolt, Electrode, Bellibolt, Electivire, and Magnezone as her ace. But if they were allowed to have Ultra Beasts, it would 100% be Xurkitree instead. It looks like something she would create. But aside from Petrie, I feel like Ione, Cobb, and Static would also make good electric gym leaders. Mainly Static, since his name is literally Static. When it comes to the flying type, any of the bird villagers can work, except for penguins, but I decided to go with Boomer anyways. Now, it is a known fact that penguins cannot fly, and Boomer is aware of this, but he still wants to learn how to fly somehow, and I feel like that's why he's always been fascinated by birds and planes and the ability to fly, which led him to become interested in the flying type Pokemon. In my headcanon, I think Boomer would be the person to invent the flying taxi services seen in Galar and Paldea, and as well as other regions, so that way other people are just able to fly as well. And I think he's also just a pilot in his spare time because he's bored sometimes and needs a hobby. His team would be Squawkabilly, Hawlucha, Drifblim, Dragonite, Kilowattrel, and Corviknight would definitely be his ace. For sure. I also have Ione down as another honorable mention for this, just because like space, rocket ships, I don't know, it works. And literally any of the bird villagers, because duh. And with the fighting type gym, there is one obvious choice to pick. I think it makes sense to pick Rooney. Rooney is literally a boxer, and I think the storyline for him would be he has a gym, the fighting type gym, as well as a gym for people to learn how to box and stuff like that. You know, with like the punching bags and stuff. I don't know what they're called. Maybe it was previously owned by his father / mentor, Walt, but it was passed down to him now that Walt has moved on with his life. Whether he retired, went to the Elite Four, or maybe he just croaked. I think the perfect team for Rooney would be Machamp, Hariyama, Breloom, Lucario, Graplock, and Hitmonchan as his ace. And they would definitely be training people how to fight on the side. And of course, there's Lucha as well, who would make sense as a gym leader too, I guess. I still don't like him though. The poison type gym was definitely the hardest one for me to come up with, but I decided to go with Sid, mainly because his aesthetic is very inspired by punk, which is similar to other Pokemon characters who also use poison type Pokemon, and I feel like his storyline would be he was like this really punk rock cool street artist who decided to open up an art gallery full of artwork made by him and his Pokemon team, and he also just runs the Pokemon gym because he's just that talented. His team would consist of like the artsiest, fartsiest poison type Pokemon, including Muck, Toxicroak, Garbodor, Gengar, Toxtricity, and Grafaiai, who is definitely his ace Pokemon. I think Drift, Naomi, and Paulo would also make really good poison type gym leaders, specifically Drift since he is literally a poison frog. Hear me out for this one, but I think Coco would make a really good ground type gym leader. Coco is a gyroid, which are based off of Haniwa, aka ancient Japanese sculptures that are buried in the ground with the dead. I feel like her gym would be set in a graveyard because of this, and it leads many people to just assume that she's a ghost type gym leader instead, and then she's able to successfully trick them and reveal that she's actually a ground type specialist for fun. There's no like advantage to it, but she's just silly despite the lack of emotions in her face. Palossand, Golurk, Marowak, how do you say that? Runerigus. Thank you, random guy. Runerigus. That's how you say it. Excadrill and Claydol would be her team, with Claydol obviously being her ace. And I think some other villagers that would make sense would be Sly, Roswell, and Anka. Tucker is full-on Flintstones tease, which would make him the perfect rock-type specialist. And I think he's either just a dude who's obsessed with the prehistoric times, or somebody who accidentally traveled from the past to the present time and is now just stuck here for the rest of his life. He is a mammoth, so I feel like the latter would make sense. Maybe he's also the person you go to when you want to restore any fossils to bring Pokemon back to life. It would make sense since these Pokemon are most likely from his time back in the day. And for his team, I went with Stonjourner, Aerodactyl, Aggron, Archeops, Probopass, and Tyrantrum as his ace. Avery and Clay I feel like would also make good rock type gym leaders, as well as Coco. Coco could be great too. I feel like there were many villagers to choose for the psychic type, but I decided to go with Muffy. And yeah, Muffy would make more sense as a ghost type, but hear me out. Her career goal in New Leaf was to become a dermatologist, so maybe she achieved those dreams and branched out and opened up an entire spa based on skincare and healing the inner mind. Or whatever they do. She's known for her gothic style, so obviously Gothitelle would be her partner Pokemon, who maybe also influenced her to master the psychic typing, although it wouldn't surprise me if Muffy was just someone with psychic powers. She looks like she knows how to levitate. Her team would be full of the biggest, baddest psychic baddies, for sure, including Gardevoir, Hatterene, Hypno, Rapska, Reuniclus, and Gothitelle, who was obviously her ace. As for some honorable mentions, I have Diana and Wart Jr. down, as well as Katrina if this was a special NPC video instead. With the ice types, once again, a penguin villager would make sense, but I decided to go with Hans instead, because he's literally a Yeti. That's it, that's the reason. His team would be a Galarian Darmanitan, Beardick, Avalugg, Walrein, Cramominable, and for his ace Pokemon, I went with Abomasnow. As for some honorable mentions, I have Sprinkle, Mary, Rolf, and Tutu. I decided to go with Megan for the bug-type gym leader, mainly because of the honeycomb wall and the beehive that you can find in her house. So maybe she's a beekeeper and she runs the bug gym as well. Her team would be Beedrill, Butterfree, Frosmoth, Spidops, Leavanny, and Vespiquen as her ace. And then some honorable mentions, I have Jambette, as well as Nat and Flick. Although Nat as a gym leader would be wild because he would try to eat his Pokemon. The ghost type gym, there's only one option, let's be honest, it's Lucky. Who else would you choose to run that? He's literally a mummy. His team obviously would be Houndstone, as well as Annihilape, Chandelure, Aegislash, because he does have 2 swords in his GameCube house, so I feel like that's a nice callback. Dusknoir, and I gave Cofagrigus as his ace Pokemon. Maybe it's the actual coffin he was buried in and he just now uses it as his Pokemon. For the steel type gym, I feel like the obvious option would be one of the robots villagers or even one of the medieval villagers, but I decided to go with Gala instead. Her design is based off a piggy bank, and her Happy Home Paradise request is to own a bank, so maybe she owns a bank and just is really rich. And she's also a steel type gym leader because coins are made out of metal just like steel type Pokemon. And her team would be Klefki, probably the keys to the bank, Klinklang, Brazong, Copperajah, Tinkaton, and obviously Goldango would be her ace Pokemon. The dragon type gym, there is an obvious option for this one, but I decided to go with Sky instead. Because in my mind, I feel like the wolves are very tight-knit and kind of all one big family, similar to the Dragon Village from Black and White, or even Hassel's family line in Scarlet and Violet. And the wolves, in my opinion, all just look like dragon-type gym leaders. Maybe it's just because I really like the wolves, and dragons are my favorite type of Pokemon. Maybe I'm just a little biased. I went with Sky specifically because dragons fly in the sky, and Sky has clouds on her face. And her Happy Home Paradise request is to have an art studio, and that just reminded me a lot of Hassel. So that's why I went with it. I feel like Sky's gym team would be Druddigon, Salamence, Flygon, Noivern, Dragonite, and Altaria as her ace Pokemon. She would mainly have dragons that have wings, so she can fly on them afterwards. I went with Cherry for the dark type gym, mainly because, once again, she has a very punky grunge aesthetic, which I think suits dark type Pokemon, and her Happy Home Paradise request is to have a runway for a fashion show, so I like to think that she is a really famous fashion designer who takes inspiration from the grunge and punk and goth movement and has an overall dark aesthetic to her, which is what draws her to dark type Pokemon to begin with. For her team, I went with Grimmsnarl, Umbreon, Absol, Zoroark, Cacturne, and Obstagoon as her ace Pokemon. As for some honorable mentions, I have Rodeo, Renee, Rasher, and Roscoe. And last but not least, we have the fairy type. And fairy core is a very popular theme to decorate your island with in Animal Crossing New Horizons, so obviously there are so many villagers who match that aesthetic that can work. And I decided to go with Julian, mainly because he's literally a unicorn. How cool would it be to have a unicorn as a gym leader? I think his gym would literally just be somebody's fairy core island off of Instagram, and there would be a little bit of cottagecore inspo sprinkled here and there. Maybe it's just like a giant magical forest similar to that mushroom town from Galar. I don't remember the name, sorry. As for his team, I went with Sylveon, Florges, Togekiss, Shiinotic, Whimsicott. You might be surprised who I picked as his ace Pokemon. No, you wouldn't. It's Galarian Rapidash. As for some honorable mentions, I have Diana, Judy, Chrissy, and Francine as well, and the Sanrio villagers. I feel like any of them would work. And as a quick bonus round before we end off, I wanted to quickly share my ideas for the Elite Four as well as a champion. The Elite Four would obviously be the superhero villagers, Kit Kat, Big Top, Ageness, and Rocket. The four of them are all just such a unique design for Animal Crossing. They're literally an ensemble cast. Why not make them the Elite Four? They're definitely powerful, they're definitely strong. I feel like the obvious typings would be just based on their colors, so water, grass, fire, and fairy, but I don't know. I'll let y'all discuss that one in the comments. And as for the champion, there really is only one magical villager who I think would be the most powerful of them all. And that, of course, is Anka. If there ever was an Egyptian-based region, she would literally be perfect for it. But alternatively, she could also work in Unova as well, since the desert region of that area is full of Pokemon that match her vibe. I think Anka's champion team would consist of Cofagrigus, Sigilyph, Crocodile, Caracosta, Hippowdon, and I also decided to give her Gardevoir because the two of them share a very similar trait.